请大家回原位。
Please be seated.
哎，有请。好，谢谢。各位记者，大家上午好。
Good morning,
欢
everyone.
迎参加12届
Welcome
全国
to
人大实施
attend
会议记者会。
the press conference of the
我
fourth
们今
plenary
天的
session.
记者会的主题是
The
人大
theme
的
of
立法
this
工作。
morning is about the legislative
很高，我
work
们
of
很高兴地邀
NPC.
请到
We are
我们
honored
全
to
国
have
人大的
invited
4位嘉宾
4
来回
experts
答
from the
大家
NPC
相
to
关的
answer
问题。
your questions.
他们是
They are
全国人大常委会法制工作委员会副主任
the Deputy Director of Commission of Legislative
全国
Affairs,
人大
Zhang
内
Shuna,
务司法委员会副主任委员王胜
the
明先生，
Deputy Director of
全国人
Internal
大
and
财
Judicial
政
Affairs,
财政
Wang
经济委
Shengming,
员会副主任委员吴
and
若
Deputy
图
Director
先
of
生
Financial and Economic
全国
Affairs,
人
Wu
大
Ritu,
环境与资源保护委员会副主任
the
委
Deputy
员
Director
袁世
of
先生。
Environment Protection and Resource Conservation Committee, Yuan Si.
下面，请大家提问。
Now we are ready to take your questions.
有请下面第3排那位第4排那位女士。对，这个。
谢谢主持人。您好，我是中国新闻社和中国新闻网的记者，向郑主任提问。您好，去年3月15日，12届全国人大3次会议表决通过了关于修改立法法的决定。您能否介绍一下1年来全国各地地方立法的情况？ 修改后的立法法赋予了社区的市地方立法权，有评论认为地方立法权扩大存在利于立法重复、选择性立法、立法质量难以保证等隐忧。您认为在地方立法工作中如何解决上述问题？谢谢。
I'm with China News Service. My question is for Madam Zheng Shuna. On the 15th of March last year, the third session of the 12th NPC Standing Committee decided to revise the legislation law, and 1 year has passed. Could you please share with us the exercise of lawmaking power at the local level? And the revised law gave cities the lawmaking power, and some people believe that extending the lawmaking power to local level could trigger some problems, including redundancy, selective power, and a selective approach, and poor quality of legislation. Could you please tell us how will you resolve these problems? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I first have to say some thanks to all the media friends here for attending the conference this morning. On March the 9th last year, exactly in this hall, I have answered some questions during the deliberation of the third session. I'm very pleased to take your question. Why? Because this demonstrates that our media friends and the entire society give prominence to the legislative system of China. As you have mentioned, last year, during the third session of the NPC, we deliberated the legislation law, and one major change is that we give all the cities legal power to make laws. Mr. Zhang Dejiang used to say on many occasions that in 2015, the Standing Committee of NPC has done a lot of work, just as he pointed out yesterday in his work report of NPC Standing Committee. And among his remarks, he mentioned 2 big missions. One is to amend the legislation law to give all the cities and municipalities the legal rights to make laws. And the second big task is the CPC Central Committee published an opinion on strengthening county and township level People's Congress's work. And these efforts are all big strides forward. And just now, you asked the first question, so I want to add some more information before answering that. Now I will answer your first question about when we give the legislation power to the localities, what is the progress until now? Since last year, after the amendment of the law, we provided some legislative power to the localities. According to the legislation law, although we have granted them the power, these localities still have to conform to some procedural requirements. The provincial level or the autonomous regions standing committee of the NPC must identify and decided on this procedure first. According to the standards, it ruled that they need to consider the population base, the regional areas, and local development level, as well as the legislation requirements and capabilities. When they consider the package of those elements, then they can decide on the final procedure. According to that, we come to know that the provinces and some other localities have their NPC paying close attention to this work, even including the Party Central Committee. Until February this year, according to our statistics from the interviews, we know that now we have 27 provinces and autonomous regions among the 31 in total, have 24 of them identify and determine on this legislation power of localities, covering 124 cities and municipalities. But of course, we have 30 autonomous prefecture and some prefecture-level municipalities which are also given such legislation power. So in total, we have the number standing at 214, but the number that we have decided to give was over 270. So now we have about 79% of those total number have realized such decision. So now we have made steady progress already in this work. For now, what is the progress made by those municipalities? According to the data, until February, we have 6 municipalities or prefecture-level municipalities having already get approval from the provincial level People's Congress. Some others have already submitted their work to the provincial level People's Congress. So this is my first answer. And as to your second question, with so many bodies of legislation, how can we guarantee the unification of legislative work? And how can we improve the quality of legislation? I remember last year in the press conference, I take the same question. Because when we amended such a law, people are becoming to get worried about the overlapping of those bodies' functions. I used to inform the media friends on the 5 fronts where we can work on. I will not elaborate on them again. But how can we press forward from now on? We have the following methods. First, we strictly adhere to the power boundaries of legislation. We know that they have 3 aspects. One is the city establishment and design, and the environmental protection, and history and cultural protection. With the legislation power, when they want to make the rules about the legislation plan, they need to conform to the 3 power limits strictly. And our commission, as a legislative body, have to step up when the localities face the unclear boundaries of their power. They first come to the provincial level, and then they resort to the National People's Congress for help. And the second thing is, even with such limits of the 3 fields, they still have to guarantee that they don't conflict with the national level or provincial level laws and regulations. I can give you an example. For example, people might be worried that maybe there will be more confusions to the administrative penalties. According to the laws, the local areas cannot limit people's freedom or annul people's licenses. So, when it comes to these types of administrative penalties, the localities must step aside. And second thing is, even with some administrative penalties, if the laws and regulations have already had some interpretations and rules on those fields, the localities must perform their powers according to the types and scope already decided by these established laws and regulations. And the third thing is, how can we improve the quality of legislation? During the past year, from our work, we can see many progress. Yesterday, Mr. Zhang Dejiang also introduced some information about holding a seminar on the local legislation work, during which he also delivered some remarks by requiring the localities to do some more work. For example, in terms of the training of local talents, our Legal Affairs Committee also held 3 sessions of training courses, training about 870 local legislative personnel. Besides, the local party central committee put premium on the training of local workers. With the power in their hand, we have established some special organizations in the localities equipped with many talents. So, among the 5 limits, with the provincial level NPC's approval, they also need to have the filing and recording in the NPC. In this way, we can improve the quality. Thank you.
那第6排，靠最左边的第6排那位先生，对。
好，谢谢主持人，我是经济日报和中国经济网的记者。我的提问是关于慈善法的。近年来呢，慈善丑闻层出不穷，不仅使这个慈善公信力严重透支，而且也伤害了人们的爱心。这些乱象呢，据说都是由于这个慈善信息不公开，资金管理的不规范导致的。针对这些乱象，这个慈善法草案将如何规制，让善款实现善运？谢谢。
I'm with Economic Daily. My question is about the charity law. Recent years saw some scandals in the field of charity, and these scandals have hurt people's feelings. And the main reason behind is the poor information disclosure and malmanagement of assets of charity organizations. How would you regulate such behaviors through the drafting of the charity law? Thank you.
谢谢你的提问。
Thank you for the
我来回
question.
答这个问题。
I'll take this question.
这些年，
In recent
我
years,
们国家慈善事业发展很
China's charity cause is developing very fast. However, we are facing a lot of problems,
就是你
among
刚才
which
提
the
到
most
的
prominent are
信息公开不
what
够
you have mentioned,
和
problems with information disclosure and malmanagement of charity assets.
慈善财产
The
怎么
charity
能够
asset
把它看住，
has to be well managed and well used.
这是慈善立法当中的重
This
要内容。
is a priority in the legislative work
我讲
for
讲
the
信息
charity
公开
law.
问题。
I'll first talk about information disclosure. The draft of the charity law now have 12 chapters.
我最看重信息公开
I give the most priority to the chapter about
这个
information
善
disclosure.
款怎么能够看住用好？
How do we manage the
慈善
assets
行为怎么规范？
and donation? How do we
一靠自律
standardize
二靠严管。
the
而
charity
自
work?
律和严管的主要
We
途
need
径
to be
是信息公开。
self-disciplined and well
慈善
supervised.
法在许多方面
And
对信息
information
公开是
disclosure is the key to all of those
慈善组织
factors.
的生命力在于
In this
信息公开
chapter,
It stipulated that the lifeline for charity work is information disclosure, and it's mandatory for all bodies and organizations to disclose information. For example, you have to state clearly why you raised the fund, and where you used the fund, and how you used the fund. This information has to be disclosed timely and regularly. And there is a platform for information closer, and also penalties for not disclosing information timely is also stipulated in the draft. And also included in the chapter is the supervision of the relevant authorities. The authorities is responsible for supervising the charity organization to disclose relevant information. So after the enaction of the charity law, if relevant organization can disclose information according to the law and meet the other obligations stipulated in the law and win the trust of the people again, it will stimulate people's goodwill for donation. The donation of the people will increase by a large margin. Thank you.
后面那位。
谢谢主持人，我是法制日报法制网记者。我们关注到电子商务现在正在迅猛发展，然后呢，已经成为了大众创业、万众创新的一个重要工具。但是呢，在这个过程当中呢，像消费者维权困难，还有一些侵犯知识产权这样的现象也时有发生。所以我们想关注一下这个电子商务法现在是大概的立法进程是什么样子的，还有就是说这部法律将在这个规范市场行为方面出台哪些比较亮眼的措施？谢谢。
With Legal Daily, my question is about e-commerce. The rapid development of e-commerce has become a main channel to encourage mass entrepreneurship and innovation. However, we have also seen problems including the IPR violation and the difficulty in maintaining rights and interests of the consumers. Could you please tell us the current status of the legislation of this law and what new measures will be introduced to regulate the market? Thank you.
感谢媒体的这位朋友提的这个问题。
Thank you for asking the question.
这个电子商务呢，是一个通过
e-commerce is a cause that is carried out through the internet and the information network. It includes the selling and buying of goods and services. It's a new form of business model. The emergence of e-commerce happened not very long time ago, but it has greatly boosted economic development and logistics, and it also facilitates people's life. However, e-commerce has its own problems.
这个电子商务这样一种经营形式的合法性问题。
For example, the legitimacy of such a business model.
市场的秩序问题
and also the market order of such a business model. All of these need regulations of the law.
还存在一些侵犯消费者权益。
Also, there is infringement of consumers' rights.
比如说
For example,
假冒伪劣呀，啊，
shoddy
欺诈
goods
侵权呢，
and fake goods
那么这些问
and
题
infringement and
有的
fraud.
是在传统的经营模式当中就有。
Some of these problems
那有一些
exist in a traditional model as well, but some
新的经营模式当中有的。
come along with the emergence of e-commerce.
电商的平
For
台责任
example, the
比如说
liability
这个数据和信息的保护的问题啊，
of
这些
the
都需要通过
of
法律
of the
来加以规
shoppers
范。
and also the protection
这个电子商务的立
of
法
the
呢，
consumers'
已
rights.
经列入了12届全国人大常委
The
会
compiling of e-commerce law is has been written into the 5-year plan for lawmaking of the NPC, and it's also the responsibility of the Financial Economic Affairs Committee of the Standing Committee. And in the draft of the law, it will include the content for the protection of consumer rights, the regulation of market level in the playing field, and some other important content. Right now, we have already an initial draft. Hopefully, it can be submitted to the plenary session of the Financial and Economic Affairs Committee and then filed to the Standing Committee of the NPC as soon as possible.
谢谢主持人，我是农民日报的记者，我想问袁主任一个问题。格大米事件之后，社会上对土壤污染问题十分关注。那么本届人大常委会呢，也把土壤污染防治法列入了常委会的规划。那么，请袁主任介绍一下相关立法的有关情况，谢谢。
I'm with Farmers Daily. My question is for Mr. Yuan. After the incident of cadmium tainted rice, people are very concerned about soil pollution, and we know that the NPC Standing Committee has made the law on soil pollution prevention a part of this legislation plan. Could you please share with us the legislation status on soil pollution prevention and treatment? Thank you.
感谢这位媒体朋友的提问，也感谢
Thank you for your question,
土壤污染
and thank
的
you
这个防治法的关注。
for following closely the law on soil pollution prevention and
媒
treatment.
体朋友所关注的那样，
As you mentioned,
土壤污染问题
soil
已经
pollution
成为继大气污
has
染、
become one of the
水污染
most
之后
prominent
引起全社
pollution
会
problem
高度关注
after air
急需替代
pollution
的
and
重大
water
环境
pollution.
问题。刚才这媒体朋友希望我能介绍这方面
You
的情
asked
况。
me to brief
首
you
先呢
on the
先
situation.
说一下为什么要
I would talk about
这
my
个制
take
定土壤
on
污染
the reason to make the law on
我
soil
们
pollution and
刚才我
prevention
说了，它已经
treatment.
是非常重大环境问题。
As I said, this is a very important, prominent issue, and we have already waged a war against pollution. But where is the battlefield? I think there are 3 main battlefields: water, air, and soil.
大家也可能知道，最近环保部最近对外宣布，
The Ministry of Environmental Protection has cancelled 2 departments, but set up 3 new departments
还有呢，环保部已经出台
concerning
了
water,
大
soil,
气
and
食
air
堂水食堂
respectively. And also
即
we
将
have
出台
regulations, 10 regulations on water, soil, and
置物的
air
3大战场
respectively. So
3大战役
these are all targeted to the 3 battlefields and
从
3
国务院有
wars
关部门
against
进行的
pollution.
土壤污染
So the
状况
State
调查结
Council
果
has carried out
我国
investigation
的土壤
against
环境总体
soil
形
pollution.
势严峻，
In China, we are
乐观
facing very severe
部分地
conditions
区
in
污染
terms of
严
soil
重
pollution,
土
especially
壤
in
污
some
染的
key
防治
areas.
事关老百姓舌尖
The
上的
prevention of soil pollution is
直接
closely
或间接
related
地
to
会
the
影
food
响到我们的食
safety
品
of the
到我们的
people
饮用水，
and also affect the quality
关
of
系到
drinking
广大人
water.
民群众的
It
切身利益，
affects
甚至关
the
系到
core
能否
interest
可
of
持
the
续发展。
people as well as the
我国
possibility of
土
sustainable
污染防
development.
治工作
The soil
基础
pollution
相对
prevention
薄弱
treatment has
没
a
有
weak
专门的单行
foundation in China. We do not
使得
have
各级政
specific
府
law
和
and
有关部门
regulation
缺乏
to
有
this.
效监管
Therefore, the authority and department do not have base
多年来
a lawful base of
全国代表
regulation.
大会
So in
期
recent
间
years,
都有
during
代
the
表提出
NPC,
立法议案。
deputies have raised many proposals
对此，
concerning
党中
this
央、全
issue.
国人大常委会和国务院
Therefore,
高
the
度重视，
State Council
经
and
中
the
央
Central
批
Party
本
Committee
届
attached
全国
great
人大常委会
importance to this,
将
and
土
with
污
their
染防治
approval, this
列入立
NPC
法规
has
划一
listed
类
the
项
law of soil pollution
环科委
prevention
负责
treatment to
牵头
one of
系
the
统
number 1
和技术审
priorities.
议
And the Environment
土壤
and
污染
Protection
与大
Resource
气
Conservation
水污染
Committee
相比
is in
其
charge
成因
of
更为
relative work.
大气的
The
质量
soil
水
pollution
污
has
染
many
工业
complex
污染建筑
factors,
污染交通运输污染
including air pollution, water pollution, construction pollution, agricultural pollution, the mining pollution, and solid waste pollution. So many factors might lead to the deterioration of soil conditions. Therefore, it's more difficult and urgent for us to do work of this regard. But as a responsible government, we have to address this issue that's closely related to the well-being of the people. Right now, we already have law on air pollution and water pollution. So among these three main battlefields, we are only lacking the law on soil pollution. We have to wage a comprehensive war against pollution, and it cannot be achieved without the law on soil pollution. Yesterday, I searched on Baidu for the item soil pollution. According to this item, it should be said that our law on soil pollution is not comprehensive and is not applicable. Therefore, we can say that it's almost a total blank. So we are making up for this blank and making up for this gap in soil pollution. This is our standpoint of making this law on soil pollution. And now I will talk briefly the background of making this law. The Environment Protection Resource Conservation Committee, with the leadership of Mr. Shen, we give priority to addressing the well-being of the people, and started by giving priority to water, soil, air pollution, as well as the well-being of the people and improve environmental condition. And also, we filed a proposal to carry out inspection on the making of these three laws, and also nuclear security law and ecosystem security law, which has been approved by the Standing Committee, and all the proposals has been incorporated into the legislation plan of the Standing Committee and the plan for inspection. So our commission was established in 2001, and since then we've been starting to working on the law and compelling of the law on soil pollution. This is the background, and now I will brief you on the issues that is addressed in this law.
First, we need to establish and improve the institutional design of this soil pollution prevention and have a clear boundary of functions and responsibilities. And second, capacity building by establishing an investigation supervision standards. Third, we will identify the economic policies to enhance input. Fourth, given the agricultural land and construction land, we will guarantee the food security and the environmental safety of people's living. And fifth, we will establish a coordination mechanism to identify the responsibilities of the general public and companies, as well as the channels for those public to participate. These are the general ideas of our design. But of course, there might be some adjustments during the real practices. As to the progress of this law, I will not elaborate on every one of them. I can give you several figures. Up until now, the soil pollution law has had 15 investigations with 25 seminars and workshops, 8 lectures, 10 drafts, with a series of reports, briefings, at the number of 70 papers with about tens of thousands of characters. Mr. Shen took the investigation team by himself, and the different agencies also established the leadership panels, of course. Now the Ministry of Environmental Pollution is drafting the draft of the soil pollution prevention and control. we designed to have 2 initial deliberation within 2016, and we will submit the draft to the Standing Committee in 2017 to be included into the legislation plan. This is my answer.
下一个问题，有请第5排，按这边数第3位那位女士。
谢谢主持人，我是检察日报也是正义网的记者。我的问题呢提给王胜明副主任委员。我们知道，人民检察、人民法院组织法和检察官、法官组织法已经被列为本届常委会1类立法项目。请问目前的进展状况是怎么样？是否有明确的审议时间表？这几部法律的修改如何与司法改革相衔接？谢谢。
With Procurates Daily, my question is for Mr. Wang Shengming. As we know that the organic laws of People's Court and People's Procuratorate and the laws on judges and procurators will be revised. And how are you going to harmonize the revision of these laws and the ongoing judicial reform? And do you have a timetable for the revision of the above-mentioned laws? Thank you.
谢谢你的提问。
Thank you for your question.
你是检察日报的记者。
You are a journalist from the procuratorate sector, so you pay attention to the revision of the procurators organization law.
同样情况的。
Of course, we have some similar cases.
法院组织法的
We
修
might
改
have heard of the revision of the court organization law and the judges organization law. So I will inform you of the Supreme Court and Supreme Procuratorate revision situation.
两院组织法
For the organization laws of the Supreme People's Court and Supreme People's Procuratorate, as you have mentioned, have some progress.
司法体制改革当中
The
的
judicial
重大
reform
举措
has given priorities to many measures. For example, the judges and the
审
procuratorate.
理下法院、检察院
For
人
those
财务的统一管理，
Below the provincial level, they need to have unified
像建立
management.
巡回法庭
We also need to have some courts
都是
and have judicial
两院组织法和
responsibility
两官
system.
法
These
修改
are
的重要
all
内容。
in the field of our revision.
两院组织法和两官法怎么修改？
How can we revise these laws?
必须坚决贯彻
We
中央有
must
关
conform
文
to
件
the
的精神，
related documents of the central
认真总
government
结
and
试点地区
organize
经验，
the regional
体现
and local
司
experience
法体制改革的
to
成果，
reflect the results of our judicial reform.
还必须积极
We
回
must
应
also respond
广大人民
to
群众的关
the
切。
worries and concerns of the general public.
两院组织法和两官
Such
法的修改，
laws
应当
revision
有利于
should
提高司
be
法效率，促进司
conducive
法公正。
to improving the justice and fairness
目
of
前
our
根据立法
legal
规
work.
划
Now, according to the plan of
两
legislation,
院组织法的修改，
the
也就是人
revision
民
of
法
the
院组织
related
法和人民
laws,
检察院
that
组
is
织
the
法的修
People's
改，
Court and People's
是由全国人
Procuratorate
大内事委
organization laws
牵头
must be led by the
两官法的
NPC's
修改工作，
Internal
也就是
and
法官法
Judicial
和检
Affairs
察官法
Committee
的修改工作，分别
For
由
the
最高人民
judges
法院
and
和最高人民检察
procurators
院来决定
organizations laws must be led by the Supreme People's
有关部门
Court and
正
Supreme
在抓紧
People's
工作，
Procuratorate. Related
争取
agencies
明
are
年
stepping up their
完成修
efforts
改
so
工
that
作。
next year they can
提醒
complete
常
such
会审。
revision work and submit for the approval of the Standing Committee of NPC. Thank you.
有请主编那位第4位那位女士。
谢谢主持人，我是齐鲁晚报齐鲁1点客户端记者。我的问题与中小企业促进法有关。中小企业是经济社会发展中的重要力量，而中小企业促进法如何促进中小企业健康发展，如何促进就业创业，成为大家非常关注的问题。那么我想请问一下，修改后的中小企业促进法将重点解决哪些方面的问题？目前它的进展情况是怎样的？谢谢。
With Shandong Evening, I have a question about SMEs. The small and medium-sized enterprises are an important force for economic and social development, and people are very interested in the legislation on SME promotion, which will help the steady development of SMEs and employment and innovation. Could you please share with us the major issues to be addressed by the revised law on SME promotion and the current status on the revision? Thank you.
Revising the SME promotion law has been listed into the 12th NPC's 5-year plan, as well as this year's legislation plan. This law has been led by the Financial and Economic Affairs Committee since 2013, together with other related agencies. As to the contents of the revision, they target at the current financing difficulties or huge burdens faced by the SMEs, as well as the poor technological and research capacities and IPR infringement, as well as the public service loopholes. So based on these fields, we will have a thorough completion and supplement of the laws. Now, the draft of SME promotion law has already been prepared. According to the NPC Standing Committee's work plan for this year, we are ready to include it to submission to the NPC's deliberation. Now, the Financial and Economic Affairs Committee is in the last stage of soliciting opinions for this promotion law. We hope that you can give more suggestions, and we sincerely welcome all the feedback and suggestions from the present media. Thank you.
下一个问题，有请中群那边第8排那个后面那位女士。现在对。
各位好，我是中央人民广播电台央广网的记者。我有一个问题想请问王主任。那么，网络募捐现在是慈善法起草过程中争议比较大的问题。对于网络募捐是否要予以限制，您怎么看？谢谢。
I'm with China National Radio. My question is for Mr. Wang. Currently, the online donation is a much debated topic. Do you think that in the drafting of the charity law, restrictions should be put on online donation? Thank you.
Dear media friends, are closely concerned about the charity law. The online donation is one channel for publicly raising funds. And online donation will have a broad-ranging effect. It is an effective and convenient method and might become a major channel for publicly raising funds. That's why it is closely followed. There might be divergence of opinions for online donation. One is for the overall openness of online donation. The other opinion is it should be open to only a certain types of charity organizations, and there might be limitations. You just now asked me for my opinions. I am for the limited online donation, because if we open the channel to all the society, we should at least consider the development level and management level of China's charity work and have a gradual openness. I would not touch upon the reasons for my suggestion. We know that the charity law is under deliberation. For online donation, we are not in the know of the final decision. This will be up to the majority of opinions of NPC deputies.
有请中区第4排中间那位男士。 男士，那位先生。
主持人好，谢谢主持人，谢谢各位主任。我是中国网的记者。我的问题是，中央明确提出，凡是重大改革都要于法有据。去年以来，全国人大常委会做出了多项改革试点的授权决定，涉及股票发行、注册等多个改革事项，有的授权还是紧急出台的。请问全国人大常委会如何保证这些授权有法有据、有理有据？而且是经过充分调研和论证得出的，而不是走过场。此外，四中全会提出，发挥人大在立法中的主导作用，能否结合过去1年的立法工作，谈一下人大的主导作用是如何发挥的？谢谢。
Thank you. With China.com. The central authorities have made it very clear that all major reforms must be based on the law. Since last year, the NPC Standing Committee has given authorization to several pilot reforms, including the reform to the stock offering system. However, some authorization has been given at very short notice. Could you please tell us how does the NPC Standing Committee make sure that these authorizations are given on the basis of law and the authorization has gone through thorough research and study and hearing instead of mere formalities? And according to the fourth plenum of the 18th CPC Central Committee, the NPC must play a leadership role in lawmaking. And what you have done in the past year, and could you please tell us how the NPC has played a leadership role in lawmaking? Thank you.
好，这个问题我来回答。
I will take your question.
有点不好意思啊，因为您提的问题。
I have to apologize first that since you asked 2 questions, so I might take more time by answering that. As to your first question, I think it is a wonderful one. Since the 18th NPC, especially the 3rd plenary session of the CPC Central Committee, with reform and opening up policy introduced, the legislation for NPC faced more issues. That is, how can we adapt our legislation to the new needs of reform and opening up? As you have mentioned, the Standing Committee of NPC has given many authorizations recent years. I can give you figures. Since the 3rd session, the NPC Standing Committee has had some pilot programs in terms of reform, with about 11 such authorizations already in place. Last year, that number was 6, which covered the reform of land system, the judicial system, and the corporate registration system, and so on, with very rich contents. You said that the NPC Standing Committee needs to think about how should we deliberate those reforms to avoid the formalities. I can give you some information. According to the 4th plenary session's requirements, that legislation should be allied with reforms and should adapt to reforms.
In the 4th plenary session, there were 4 requirements. First, practice and experience, if mature enough, needs to be turned into legislation or law. If not mature, if pilot projects are needed, it has to be authorized according to lawful procedure. And third, if a law and regulation cannot meet the demand of reform and opening up, it needs to be revised or abolished in a timely manner. The authorization that we have is made according to the second stipulation that I mentioned. That is made according to the lawful procedure. State Council submitted to the Standing Committee, and I can raise 2 examples to illustrate such procedure. The first example, in authorizing the setting of the free trade area in Shanghai, the State Council gave a proposal saying that authorize the setting up of a free trade area in Shanghai. And this regulation is made by the State Council. When it was submitted to the Standing Committee, the member of the Standing Committee pointed out that according to the legislation law, this authorization have a clear purpose, item, scope, and a term. This proposal submitted by the State Council, in terms of scope, is not clear enough. It mentioned Shanghai and some other areas, which is listed by the State Council, is applicable to such law. But according to the member of the Standing Committee, you might have noticed that the final decision made by the Standing Committee only give authorization to Shanghai. In the second year, because of the requirement of reform, another authorization was made, and the authorization was given to Guangdong, Tianjin, and Fujian to adjust their law temporarily. So it has to be law-based. And second example, the Standing Committee last year gave out an authorization to the Beijing Daxing District and other 33 districts in the reform of land resources in rural areas. Some of the codes and regulations were suspended in this process. However, in deliberation, the member of the Standing Committee also pointed out that the rural land resources reform has to be strictly managed. So in the final decision, you might check out when you get back, apart from authorizing the State Council to suspend some of the land management law and urban real estate regulation, it also incorporates 3 other requirements or bottom lines. First, the public ownership of the land resources has to remain unchanged because it is stipulated in the Constitution. And second, the so-called red line of arable lands cannot be changed. And third, the interest of the farmers can by no means be undermined. Therefore, in the deliberation of these laws, the members of the Standing Committee is working in a very responsible manner. These 2 examples illustrated that this authorization might be under very short notice, but we are highly responsible and is done according to the lawful procedures. So, all in all, the Standing Committee proactively promotes reforms and providing lawful support to such reforms. At the same time, the Standing Committee also carry out our obligations according to lawful procedures, and the Standing Committee also is responsible for the inspection of such procedures. Last year, you might have noticed that according to the NPC work report, the Standing Committee deliberated 2 decisions on authorization. First is the Shanghai Free Trade Area, and second is on the administrative litigation procedure. Your second part of your question is how did the NPC play the leading role in last year's lawmaking process. In the 4th plenary session, we set up the goal to further promote the rule of law. There are 2 important focus that we listed. First is two functions, the so-called two functions. The NPC should be playing a leading role in legislation process, and second, the legislation should also play the role to lead and promote. The first aspect, according to legislation law, the NPC should play a leading role in legislation process, including the compiling, the deliberation, and drafting of laws and regulations. In the past year, according to our work plan, all of the proposal for legislation is done after careful discussion and deliberation. So by the end of 2014, the work plan has been approved by the Standing Committee, but it is not until March last year, in a plenary session, the deputies carried out adjustment of such working plan. And in the drafting, in terms of drafting, I also have some figures for you. The top legislator mentioned in his work report that last year we enacted 5 laws and made 37 revisions of existing laws. Among these laws and regulations, some of the adjustments happened only to some items and chapters, but a lot are newly made laws and fully revised laws. This number is 13, among which 7 are made by special commission of the NPC and also led by the Commission of Legislation Affairs. And proposals were made by the relevant authorities, so the number is increasing by a large margin. The Standing Committee is now deliberating 6 more laws, among which 4 is made by our different commissions and led by the Commission of Legislation Affairs. Charity law, for example, is drafted by International Judicial Affairs Committee, and the security law is drafted by the Financial and Economic Affairs Commission, and the Wildlife Protection Law is drafted by the Environment Protection and Resource Conservation Committee. So in the drafting process, the NPC is playing a bigger role and leading role. In the process of deliberation in recent years, we stress the function of deputies as the masters in legislative process. How do we do that? A lot of laws still passed after deliberation of the plenary session of NPC. Therefore, the deputies can vote for their opinions in the process, and also the Standing Committee has to listen and solicit the public opinions. For example, the 9th Amendment to criminal law last year. In the process, 81 proposals of amending the criminal law was adopted by the Standing Committee. And also in the amendment of the law on air pollution, also solicit the opinions of many deputies of the NPC. So also the legislation laws revision solicited the opinion of the deputies, and the opinions raised by the deputy amounted to more than 1,000 items. I will not list them all, of course. And also in deliberation, we also adopt a lot of social opinions from the general public, and then it is voted through by the Standing Committee. Therefore, a lot of cases and examples can showcase the importance NPC is playing in legislation process.
有请第二排这位女士。
谢谢主持人，我是羊城晚报金阳网羊城派手机客户端全媒体记者。我向袁主任提问，是这样的，我们都知道核能对于环境的治理能发挥非常大的作用，但是核事故带来的风险也会让民众恐慌。我想请问袁主任，您如何看待这对矛盾？谢谢。
Thank you. My question goes to Mr. Yuan. We all know that nuclear energy plays a very important role in addressing environmental issues. However, there are also risks of nuclear accidents which can be very worrying. And what is your take on that?
感谢这位媒体朋友提的
Thank
这个
you
问题。
for raising the question.
解决环境污染
To address pollution problem,
是调整能源
we need
结
to
构。
adjust the energy mix.
那么核能呢是一个选
Nuclear
项。
nuclear power
以法国为例，法
is
国电力
one option.
78%
For example, in France,
因
78
此
comes
实
from
现了
nuclear
环境安全、环境质量良好。
nuclear power
核
generation.
能对优化能源
And
结构
nuclear power also is very effective in solving environmental problems. However, in history, nuclear accidents do happen
法国没有发
that
生核
which
事故。
makes people worry about the security of such a power. But France has very advanced technological
实际上，中国和
level
平利
and
用核能
also very well-rounded
采用的
regulations
核
for
技术十
nuclear.
分安全。
Therefore, they
有
do not
良
have
好的
accidents.
核安全记
In
录，
China, we have a very good record in
也
nuclear
形成了较
safety.
为完整的
Also,
核
we
工
have
业
a
体系和
well-rounded
法规体系。
regulation and law
在
framework
国际上也是
for the
受到
for the usage
这个高
of nuclear
赞誉的
power,
评价。
which
但
is
是呢，
also
人们
applauded
还是
by the
有一些
international
顾虑和
society,
恐惧的心理。
international community, but people still have
所
certain
以
fears
刚才那媒体朋友
of
是如何
such
去
nuclear power.
去处理这
So
样矛盾？
you
我觉得
mentioned
就是
the
需要
handling of such issue.
制定核安全法，
I think the key to this
提
is to
升
make
法律
nuclear
效率，依
safety
法
law
保障核安全，消
to
除人们
safeguard
人们的
the
顾虑，
security of nuclear power
或者
plants
说是减少人们的顾虑。
according to law in order to
制
reduce
定核
people's
安全法
worries. The making of
也
such law
是履行我国对国际上的一个承诺。
is also
习近
fulfilling
平主
our
席在
commitment
第
to the
3届
international
核安全
community.
峰会上
In the third
明确
nuclear
提出，
security
我国坚
summit,
持理
President Xi
性
Jinping
协
pointed
调
out
并进
that
核安全观，
we
扎
have
实
the new
推进
concept,
核
nuclear
安全
concept
工作
of safety
法制化。
and coordination,
所以这也是中央
and
的
we will
一个
we will lay a solid
方针。
legislative foundation for development
核安全
of
立
nuclear
法
power.
已经纳入立法
The
规划，
legislation
由
work
环资委负
for
责。
nuclear power
提请审议。
is written into the work
现
plan
在正在
of the standing committee, and my commission is responsible for the drafting of
制定
such
的这
law.
样一个关注，也希望
And I want to thank you all for your interest in the making of this law, and hopefully in the future you can be part of the soliciting process of this law. We are looking forward to hearing from your advice.
有请第4排万里所先生。
谢谢主持人。我是人民日报、人民网、人民日报客户端的记者。我的问题是关于民法典的，就是这几年这个社会高度关注民法典的这个编纂。那么民法典是对于保护私权利和完善我们的市场经济具有重大的这个意义。但是呢，怎么在民法典的编纂的过程当中呢，这几年经历了这个极其起落。但是呢，这个党的18届四中全会提出我们要完成这个民法典的编纂。在今年的首场的新闻发布会当中，发言人傅莹也提到，今年我们会完成这个民法总则的编纂，预期在6月份会提交常委会审议。那么我想请问的就是，我们在这个民法典的编纂过程当中，为什么要分开来编纂 这个当中我们编纂民法典的这个难点在哪里？这个我们是怎样一种考虑？那么另外的话，就是我们整个一部完整的民法典的编纂是否已经有了一个时间表？谢谢。
Thank you. I'm with People's Daily. My question is about civil code. Now, people are very interested in the compiling of the civil code in China because this is very important for the protection of individual rights and the market economy. However, the compilation of the civil code has experienced twists and turns. According to the fourth plenum of the 18th CCPC Central Committee, the compilation of the civil code will be completed. And according to Madam Fu Ying, the general principles of the civil code will be finished this year and it will be submitted in June to the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Why are you going to follow a phased step or step-by-step approach in the compilation of this code? What makes it so difficult? And what is your plan to finish the compilation of the civil code? And do you have a timetable for that? Thank you.
那个记者朋友提的这个问题啊，
The questions you have raised cover a wide range of areas, so it is supposed to be answered by Zheng Shuna. But I had deals privately with Ms. Zheng by saying that if you ask about civil code, I will take that question. I respect her a lot.
民法典是公民日常生活
Civil
和企业
code
生产经营的基本规范。
matters the people's daily
老百
life
姓
and
有
corporate
哪些人身
production
财
and
产权利？
operation. For example,
企
the
业
common people's
它怎么开展
freedom
经
and
营活
the
动？
rights of property,
基本的规矩
and how can the
都在民法典。
corporates perform their operations. The basic rules are
编
included
纂民
all
法
in the
典，
civil
你
code.
刚才也讲到了，
As you
是
have
党的
mentioned,
18届四中全会
compiling
提出的
civil
重
code
大
has been raised by the
是全
fourth
面依
session
法
of the
治国
18th
的
CPC
重要
Central
措施。
Committee. It is a major measure taken towards the rule
这
of
项
law.
工作有关部门
This work
主
has
要
been
是
taken
国人大
by
常委会和
related
法律程度
agencies,
讲权
mainly
全
by
国人
the
大常委会法
NPC
制工作委
Standing
员会
Committee,
主要是
especially
由他
the
们
Commission
正在抓紧
of
进行。
Legislative Affairs.
那么路线图是啊，
We
列征
have
今
a
年
roadmap.
按照程序提
Roadmap
请
that
常
is,
委会审议
we will
民法
submit
总
for
则
deliberation by the Standing
民法
Committee
总则通过后，
before the
再
end
进一
of
步
this
推
year.
进。
After the general rules have been approved, we will compile the other rules of the civil code.
说那个民法
You
典的编
asked just
撰为
now
什么不一气
why
呵成，
we take
而是要那么
step-by-step
分编的一步
method
一步来
to
做。
compile the civil code.
我想到啊，大概10年前，
Your question reminds me of my experience decades ago, when the Standing Committee was reviewing and deliberating of the property rights law. The Standing Committee deliberated the property rights law and took several steps towards the compilation exactly the same way. We know that civil code covers a wide range of fields and with huge workload.
你比如说不说以前的民法典的那个编撰情况，
Let alone the compilation of civil code years ago.
2002年
By only mentioning the recent civil code, for example, that deliberation in 2012,
大概有多少？
we can remember that in that
1200多条。
draft we had about 1,200 clauses.
咱们现在的法律通过的
But for the
法律
current
最
version,
高的条文、最多的条文数，
the largest number of clauses and rules belong to the criminal law and the contract law with about 400 clauses and items. For those with 1,200 items, I believe this is not the final number.
仅从2002年提
So
出
based on
审议的民法草案，
the civil code draft proposed in 2002 for deliberation of Standing
目
Committee,
前法律条文数最多的
the number of the clauses in that version was already about 3 times
所以应该
of
说
that with the largest
民
number
法典
of
的工作
clauses
涉及面非
existing.
常广，内容非常复杂。
So we can see the workload of compilation of civil code. and the wide range of areas covered by the Civil Code. When the Standing Committee deliberated the Civil Code, it will take much more time. The compilation of Civil Code has undergone ups and downs in China, but still press forward, especially since reform and opening up. The rules of Civil Code have been keeping improving. So I am fully convinced and confident about the compilation, and I believe in the near future it will be open to the market. Thank you.
下一个问题，有请第4排那位男士，后面的，哎，好。
谢谢主持人，我是《瞭望周刊》的记者。我们知道立法法里面明确规定，就是省、自治区、直辖市在制定地方性法规的时候，不得与宪法、法律等相抵触。但是我们看到现在全国的不少地方都在针对汽车等等出台现行的一些规定，尤其是个别的地方，甚至还想把这个现行的时间和范围还要扩大。就是我想问的问题，就是说，这是否与立法法中规定的就是不得超越权限？这个相违背，这是否已经超越了权限？再一个就是说，地方的立法如何能够不任性？我想请问一下，还有就是全国人大的常委会会在什么样的情况下启动这种适用性与备案审查？谢谢。
Thank you. I'm with Outlook magazine. My question is about the legislation law. According to the legislation law, when the law is drafted at the local level, it must not go against the Constitution. And currently we see that there have been a lot of efforts at the local level to draw up regulations or rules on the traffic of vehicles, and they are going to put more restrictions on vehicles and extending more time on the ban of traffic for these vehicles. Do you think this is against the legislation law? Do you think this has go beyond the scope of reference? And does the National People's Congress Standing Committee have any plan to step up the work concerning the record supervision? Thank you.
这个谢谢，实际上是代表老百姓提的这个问
Actually,
题
you
啊。
asked the questions on behalf of the general public, so I want to thank you for
第
raising
一
that
个
to
关于
us.
这个
I
各
will
个地
take
方
that.
规定限行的
First,
问题，
for the
我也可以
traffic
介绍一
controls
点
in
情
the
况。
localities,
就是
I
我
can
们
give
这
you
个
some
大气污
information.
染防治法
We know that the law on
在
air pollution
国务
control
院
and
提交这个议
prevention
案以后，在常委会
has
审
been
议的过
submitted
程
to
当
the
中，也有
Standing Committee
这
of
个议
NPC
案
for
当中也
deliberation,
规
and
定
during
了
this process,
限行限购的
we
一些
have
措施
had
规
some
定了这些
rules
措施
on the
那么在常
traffic
委会审议过
controls.
程当中呢，常委会组成人员就
During the
提出来
deliberation,
这
the
个
NPC
是不
Standing
是
Committee's
对公民的
members
权利
also raised the idea that
侵犯
whether
啊
it's
提
an
出了这样的
infringement on the rights of
那
the
么后
general
来
public.
也可以，你也可以注意，后来这
You
个
might
大
have
气
already
污染防
noticed
治
that
法
later
在这
the
个
law
方面
on
呢，
air
这个
pollution
做了一
prevention
些
and
修改
control
啊。
has made
第一个
some
呢是
adjustments in
删
this
去了
area.
机动车
First
限行
adjustment is
这
we
样
have
的一个规定
deleted
啊
the
这样的
traffic
一个规定
controls of
主
those
要考虑呢，
automobiles.
一个是就是这个规定涉及公民财产权的行使，
Because we
应
think
当
this
慎重。
might infringe
第二
the
个呢，就是
property
解
rights
决
of
机
the
动车
general
的污
public.
染，
And the
也
second
可以
is to
通过
solve the
提
issue
高油
of
品质量、
emissions
提高
from
用
the
车的成本
vehicles.
这些方
We
式
might
来
be
解决。
able to solve these
这
issues
个
by
第三个呢，就是
improving
这个
the
规定呢是授权
environmental
了
protection
省级政府规定限
or
行的
reducing emissions.
范围太大，政府来行使这
And
个
the
权
third
利
consideration is
未必合适。
this
另外一个
covers
呢
a wider
很可能
range.
呢这个是
It is
要分
improper for the
分割的统一市
government
场
to exercise
第四个理
powers.
由呢，就
We
是
should
社会成本
resort
高
to the
行动
market
意
to
见
solve
大
this
啊
issue. And the
两次
fourth
网上
consideration
公
is
开征
there
求意
might
见
be
反对
too
限行
many
的有很多
opinions
人
from the
就
general
是考虑
public
这样
who
的情
voice
况
their
呢，
concerns
就
and
没有规
oppositions
定
to us.
这个
So
限行。
based on those
那么地
considerations,
方
we
还能不能限
delete
行？
the
就
rules
是
on
您刚才
traffic
讲到
controls.
的，很
But
多地
can
方
the
规定了限
localities
行，包括我们的
issue the
也
traffic
规定了
control
限行。
rules?
它这种规定是不是违反上位法？
Are
违
these
反法律
rules against
那
the
么我们说
Constitution?
在这个法律的这部法律当中，有一条规定叫做临时限行。
We have the
临时限行
temporary
就是
traffic
道路
control
这个
regulation in the
根据这个
Constitution.
地方的实际情况
That
呢
is to say,
你
based
地
on
方
the
性法
situation
规
in the
可以
localities,
规
the
定
local
一些
laws
限
and
行的
regulations
这个
can have some rules
这
about
是
the traffic It is still hard to say that it is definitely against the laws because the laws have already said that the localities can make temporary rules according to their situation locally. According to my knowledge, Beijing, Shanghai, and Tianjin all had such rules about traffic according to the severity of pollution. Besides, the second question you raised covers how can we strengthen the recording and supervision of the local laws and regulations. According to the legislation law, these local laws and regulations after approval and formulation must be submitted and recorded to the State Council and Standing Committee of NPC. All the special committees of the NPC, as well as what Mr. Shen mentioned as the Committee of Legislative Affairs, have this authority to review and supervise the local laws and regulations. As to the detailed works carried out, they were carried out by the special agency under us. How can we enhance our supervision? The State Council formulated some administrative laws. The Supreme Court and the Procuratorate also had some judicial interpretations. When it comes to us, our agency will supervise all these laws one item after another. For the local laws which have been submitted to us, for now, to be frank, we haven't reviewed all of them within this time period because that was very large workload. We know that the localities already have the legislation power, but they still need to come to the NPC for deliberation and supervision. So, if the power has been identified by the autonomous regions, then we have 320 cities or prefecture-level cities or autonomous regions having the power to make laws. So if all of those work come to us, we cannot finish such a huge workload within a short period. And related civil organizations have the right to give the suggestions to us in this work. From the letters from the public or organizations to us, we can solicit some opinions. For another, we can supervise the local laws with selection. For example, last year, our agency gave more priority to the administrative approvals laws in the localities. For example, we will decide on whether they timely amend and adjust the administrative rules according to the laws. And during our supervision, we truly discovered that some local laws go against the Constitution. And I noticed that in this society, people might wonder why didn't the NPC Standing Committee use their rights to annul or abandon some of those laws. According to the legislation law, if the special committees of NPC or the other working agencies discover that some local laws are contrary to the laws and regulations, they have one procedure requiring the Standing Committee to give suggestions to the lawmaking agencies by informing them of such contrariness. And they can ask the localities to amend and adjust such laws and regulations by themselves. And we do have discovered such behaviors. So this is a procedure stipulated by the laws. So we don't need to resort to such authority of ours to annul those laws. If they refuse to amend the laws, then we have to resort to the last rights. Thank you.